this is one of the things that I think is really interesting. When I was reading about the decision to use the atomic bomb, there was disagreement at the top in America. Admiral Lay thought it would be crossing the line. He said, "Why don't we just gas their cities? If we're going to do this, it's the same. It would be the same as gassing them all, right? It's on a par with that, and that's unacceptable. We don't do that, right?" And one of the guys talking about this, he says academics sit and think about this for months on end or years on end. They toss and turn whether to deploy the atom bomb. We didn't have the kind of time people have to think about this stuff now. This was happening to us right then and there. The decisions were upon us. You know, the Trinity test successful. Potsdam conference is happening. What are we going to do now? We've got to launch an invasion in October. How are we going to line that up? No, it's coming at you like that.
Hello. At 1830 hours, on the 4th of May 1945, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery accepted the unconditional surrender of German forces in northwestern Europe from Admiral Hans-Georg von Friedeberg. This was one of a number of surrenders that took place across the European theatre of World War II. Months later, Japan surrendered with a radio statement that has since become a satirical masterpiece. Al Murray joins to discuss these and more as we delve into whether Monty won the surrenders and did the Americans have no option but to drop those 2 atomic bombs. If you haven't heard last Wednesday's episode, do check that out. I discuss women of the Troubles with veteran journalist Martin Dillon. More on this subject is to come on the pod. You'll find links in the show notes, and if you want to get in touch, please do via X or email history@aspectsofhistory.com. But in the meantime, it's me talking Victory 1945 with Al Murray. Al, welcome back. Very kind of you to join me.
Thanks. I feel like I'm becoming a regular.
Well, steady on, not that much. Victory 45.
Yep.
Very handsome copy, actually. Looks great with Monty overlooking a. That is Dönitz, isn't it?
No, it's von Friedeberg.
Von Friedeberg, sorry.
Yeah. Grand Admiral Friedeberg. Yeah.
Right. Monty, I was very interested in Monty. He's on the cover, so I wanted to speak about this because he was desperate to sort of win the war for the Allies.
Yeah.
Do you think he won the surrender war in the West?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because and I think it's really interesting. After they've gone to see him and Flensburg, Dönitz's government, they're having they're talking about the first encounter with Monty when von Friedeberg first goes to see him and he's sent back. Keitel, who is one of the senior people there, says, or afterwards says, we should have gone to Eisenhower because we'd have been able to like bamboozle him and string him along and all this sort of thing. But the problem is we went and saw a proper professional soldier who saw us for what we were, defeated, and he wouldn't let us. He saw through us, and he saw his opportunity and made us surrender then and there in the way he did. And obviously Monty then passes them on to Ike, but basically he set the ball rolling. He's made them sign a surrender. He's made them surrender forces. He's made them do it. And rather than because the surrender Montgomery gets the Germans to sign at that point, he isn't authorized to offer and isn't authorized to issue, but does anyway because he's a soldier. He knows he's got to grab his moment, and they know that, he knows that, and as a result, I think he wins in that regard. And it's very, very interesting because he's really miffed about not going to Berlin, where he thinks the political capitulation will occur. And he's right. If you don't, but the fact that they come to him first, the fact that he takes the first surrender, in Germany of the Reich, because we've had the Italian thing before, but that it's all about what's happening in Germany at this point, I think is really, really important. And yes, he does win. I think he knows what he's doing. He's got this caravanserai of journalists with him and the BBC and all this sort of thing. So he makes damn sure that everyone knows about it as well. fails to contain the news somehow.
But is a bit of a and I guess this is inevitable because of what the Second World War was. But is this an example of a, a, a commander, a general, overstepping the mark and delving into, an area that he shouldn't be?
Well, yeah, to an extent, but also he wants the war over. He wants it to end. He's sick of his guys being killed, and I think that he's not fussed about killing Germans. And this is what's very interesting is when they say, when he says, you've got a deadline, you've got to be back, and if you wanna carry on the war, I'll be delighted to help you do that. And we will carry on killing Germans, and that won't bother us. But he doesn't want any more British soldiers killed, and I think what's interesting is just before, the fortnight before, he's lost one of his LOs, a guy called John Poston, who's killed on one of his liaison officers out on a trip. What Monty would do is send officers out with they had license to go anywhere and ask questions on his behalf, and then report back to him in the evening. So he didn't have to rely on reports from his subordinates. He sent guys out to find out, see how that correlate with what he was being told. And one of these guys, John Poston, is killed just 2-3 weeks before the surrender, and it's a guy who's been with Monty since Monty became Monty, essentially, with 8th Army, and it's someone he really has great affection for, and so he knows that he's not some detached, aloof general that doesn't understand the cost of what he's doing. He knows perfectly well what war is, and there's a great encounter before D-Day where he's inspecting, does the rounds inspecting everyone. And he says to a soldier, what's the most important thing in your possession? And the soldier says, my rifle, sir, thinking he's got the right answer. And Monty goes, no, it's your life. That's the most important thing in your possession. And you, that's who he is, really. I know he's a prig, and I know he's difficult. I know he's like sort of into his self-publicity. I know he's very big-headed by the end of the war and all that sort of stuff. But actually what he's trying to do is get as few British people and Allied soldiers killed as possible. That's what he's trying to do. And so ending the war and grabbing the moment and taking that moment, that opportunity, is entirely within his remit. Although he's not supposed to have done that, but who cares?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a side of Monty, I guess I hadn't appreciated. But
Well, I think there's so much historiographical controversy around him, and there's been so much sort of heat and light around his reputation, largely because of the memoirs he published in the 50s, which are all like, what a genius I was, and I got that right, and all this.
And he's very rude about Eisenhower as well.
Yeah, and all that. Yeah. Is it terrible? I think I say in the book that it's he gave himself the worst character reference anyone's ever given themselves. After the war, and the memoirs constitute that. I think that's true. But the truth is, he's coming at it from the perspective of, in the First World War, he's shot through the lungs. He's left for dead, and he's very, very, very badly injured. And the man who goes to dress his wounds is killed and lies on top of him all night. Monty knows what war is. He's not this detached, aloof, because he's one of those people with 80 years distance. Oh, he's probably autistic. There's all that like being laid. Well, first he was probably a paedophile, then he was probably a homosexual. Now he's, so kind of whatever the kind of like explanation du jour has been ladled onto poor Monty. Whereas in fact what he was one of the things about him, he's a widower. His wife dies before the war, and he just goes, all right, I'll shut myself down and devote myself to my job. Which is now seen as, he's a weirdo and he's like emotionally cauterized and all that. Well, no, maybe his wife died. He can't cope. He's done emotionally in that respect. That happens to people, doesn't it? The fact that he's a big field marshal who upset lots of people after the war, which I don't, and during the war, I don't care about that. I'm more interested in, is he effective? Is he going to do a good job? Because one of the things that always gets applied to him is that he's overcautious. But that's about not wanting your men to be killed, which strikes me as, we live in a risk-averse age, and for some reason we're supposed to not like Montgomery.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's interesting, and he'd come a long way because he'd obviously been in France in 1940 when.
Yeah, with 3rd Division, and had fought a very successful divisional action, even though the BEF have such a bad time. He's one of the people who emerges from that debacle with his reputation intact, and a patron in the form of Brooke, because after all, without Alan Brooke, there is no Monty.
Yeah, who's a fascinating character.
Also, I mean, this is the other thing.
And emotional.
And very emotional, but also, all these people who are controlling their emotions. Why are they controlling their emotions? Because they're emotional. It's always this idea that people who are controlling their emotions are somehow cold. No, they're trying to keep them in check because they know how powerful they are. I mean, I mean, the thing is, I think that's really interesting about Jim and I have been doing the podcast for 6 years now, nearly.
I should mention that co-author as well of
yes,
the book. Forgot to mention that.
Yes, the co-author, my co-author James Bond. And what's lovely about this is an idea I had last summer. I said, we got the anniversaries coming up, and the surrenders are all different and strange, and also you could use each one as a sort of essay to write about a different aspect of things if you wanted. And Jim went, yeah, what a great idea, and told his publisher. Jim sort of got this boundless enthusiasm and a sort of load me up attitude. Yeah, what a great idea. Let's do that. Goes to our publisher, who I was just about to publish my book about Arnhem with, at Penguin or at Bantam, and they said, yeah, why not? And then you're, oh fuck, we've got to write the thing, right? And it's got to be ready for April, which means it's got to be ready in January, which means it's got to be finished in November, which means it's got to be written now. And Jim's sort of indefatigable energy, and also like his experience. This is my third history book, and his experience, his knowing where to look, knowing what sources to go to, and all that is something he leaves me for dust. So I'm like going, oh, I think I've got this, and I think I found that, and he's like, yeah, you need to look at this. Okay. He's still very much the pro. I'm very much the amateur. And so the book came about very quickly as a result. But basically, we one of the things we get with the podcast, we get this thing where people go, well, you've never been a soldier, so how can you write about military history? Anything? You know what? No one's been a Roman legionary in living memory, right? You may have been a soldier recently, but you weren't a Second World War soldier. So whatever. You've never played football for England. You're not allowed an opinion on the last England match. You've never managed an England football team, so you're not allowed to criticise Thomas Tuchel. Let's just stop it.
That's not a serious criticism.
No, I know, but you'd be amazed how often it pops up, right?
Right.
And the thing with that is, yeah, fine, but what do you mean by soldier? Because when you look at the Second World War, are we talking a 19-year-old PBI guy, infantryman? We're talking a sapper operating a grader guy, and he's a civil engineer, and he's gone into the Royal Engineers. We're talking about a gunner observer officer with his slide rule. What are we talking about here? Or are we talking about a supreme commander like Eisenhower, who has no combat experience and has been brought in because the people above him know he can do the job of coordinating everyone and moving them along and he's like a brilliant man manager, corps diplomat. I can't write about Eisenhower because I've never been supreme Allied commander. It's just silly, right? But what it also illustrates is there is no one kind of soldier. So that what I find fascinating is you can write about the infantryman, or you can write about what are the pressures Eisenhower's facing. If you do the simple sort of spreadsheet, the people he's got under him, it's completely bananas. The responsibility of this man, millions and millions of people of different nations. And that's before, that's before you get into how his generals are all jostling for position and then their subordinates are jostling for position. He's having to manage the people, managing the people. And then also trying to save lives as well, like Montgomery. And also in a war that the Americans made very, very clearly until they were drawn into it, were not interested in fighting. European entanglements and all that. The isolationist America is only 2 years ago, when you think about it. If the first American campaign in North Africa is only 2 years after Eisenhower has won the presidency on an isolationist ticket. So there's an awful lot of people in the American army who think our boys shouldn't be doing this at all. So if they got to, we need to get it over with, and we need to get it over with because, and the reason we're doing it is because these are bad people that need stopping. There's the moral component in the American high command is really, really interesting. They all believe it. They all believe in it. They all absolutely have no doubt in their minds about what they're doing and why. And Eisenhower is the sort of perfect exemplar of that. Won't shake hands with Nazis, won't treat with them, won't see them, won't see anyone that's sent to him by the Flensburg government, by Dönitz, until they've signed the surrender. Locks himself away in his office. I think it's kind of amazing as a piece. He's not even curious, No, I'm not seeing Yodel. Fuck him.
Well, that moral component that you mentioned, I mean, I've just been reading the section on Gunskirchen, and you have Alan Muskin and Hugo Ginn.
Hugo Grin,
Grin. But this is just, you've got a lot of camps in southern Germany where they're being uncovered, and this is an element of that surrender where obviously everyone's so delighted that the war is over, but
well, and I mean, it in a way, I mean, there is this extraordinary business of the reveal of the camps. Is that there's, that Nazism and its geopolitical expression is sort of the thing that's drawn the Americans, the British, or the British and then the Americans into the war. But then to get the lid off the Reich and discover what's in there, what's inside it, and obviously the high command of, have known about death camps, and they've known about the Holocaust, and they don't know what they believe, and they don't know what they can do about it, and they don't have a real grip on its extent, and also are convinced that what they have to do is win the war as quickly as possible to put that to a stop. But to actually encounter it, that as you say, that those what's really interesting about Gunskirchen as well. No one's heard of that camp. No, it's not one of the big name camps that's in people's imaginations. But these places are literally everywhere. They're everywhere in Germany. They're any major conurbation where there's engineering works going on, there's slave labor doing it. These things are literally everywhere. And then there's the death camps as the sort of next tier. And I think it's when the Americans discover this, the GI now understands what's been going on in a way that the generals kind of had a pretty good idea, but the GI is now confronted with it directly. And those chapters are, I mean, they're the stuff about Hugo Grin, his experience, and Alan Moskin discovering, Ich bin auch ein Jude, I am also a Jew. It's like,
the hugely emotional response from the inmates when they hear that. It's
incredible. Desperate, absolutely desperate. And what's obviously great that we have Hugo Grin, who was able to bear witness and talk about this, but he's the absolute complete exception. Him and his father are like, that he loses his brother. His mother survives Auschwitz, but the point is these people are extremely rare and able to tell us about death marches and about the Grin and his father are working on basically a holiday camp for German officers in the summer of 1944. What? I mean, it's just the craziness of all of it, which I think even on show in the surrenders. In this, when Alfred Jodl stands up and says, Germany's, suffered privations no one understands, and we've done our best to fight under very difficult circumstances. Thanks very much, and we hope that the victors will take that into account. Like, what? Shut up!
Yeah, the delusion is insane.
Yeah. And permeates absolutely everything. So all of the stalling for time in the surrenders is the idea that they're going to get their soldiers away from the Soviets and surrender them to the West. There isn't the literally the road, bridge, communications to move millions of people around Germany. It's impossible. So all of the way they're seeing the world is fantastical and hallucination. But a deadly one, a real one, one with real world consequences. It's not that they're not playing Risk. They're playing Risk for real, as it were. The fantasy is enacted in reality, and the delusion is amazing. And again, that's the signature of the Japanese government's response.
Hello, Ollie here. Please forgive my interruption, but I wanted to let you know that at Aspects of History, we produce a digital magazine featuring articles, interviews, short stories and book reviews of the best historical writing available. Authors featured including Ben McIntyre, Lucy Worsley, Andrew Roberts and plenty more. An annual subscription is available for only $9.99, that's pounds or dollars. Yep, you heard that right. That's 6 issues for under £10 or dollars. Head over to aspectsofhistory.com to subscribe, where you can also gift subscriptions. Now back to the show. That's my favourite surrender. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful line, but bonkers.
Absolutely bonkers. And the fact that after Hiroshima they respond with mokusatsu, where they're basically saying either the thing, it means either they're killing with silence, is what the katakana means, spells, uses the symbols to say killing with silence. So it's either no comment or it's fuck you, right? After which isn't the expression I used in the book, but basically, nah, forget about it. Not interested. Tell it to the Marines or something, is what the Japanese government is saying after the first atomic bomb. And the thing is, the first atomic bomb, is also is part of a continuum of American air power. Absolutely, just the fact is Hiroshima was still in one piece, but that's before it's bombed. That's remarkable because the rest of the country has been smashed to buggery. And since the Americans abandoned precision bombing, once you get the Tokyo firebombing, which kills 100,000 people, displaces millions of people, and what obviously the Japanese have this built-in culture that they can't surrender, but even then, surely surrender. I mean, it's absolutely boggling, and you have the Army Corps people. What it boils down to in the Big Six is the civilians in the end who are on the war cabinet in the end go, we should stop, and it's the military who are going, no, we got to carry on, we've got to fight to the death. And then are prepared to be disloyal to the emperor in order to disobey the emperor in order to be loyal to him, or the idea of the kokutai, of the polity. All of that is absolutely bananas. And I didn't know about it at all, and then went into reading it and looking at all this stuff. And in a way, the coup is kind of well known. The attempted coup by the colonels who try and seize power, but it's the stuff around it. The scale of destruction in Japan, the scale of defeat, the writings on the wall, and also this idea that the Japanese government is basically going to, they know they've lost, but what they're going to do is make the Americans really pay for the victory in order to get concessions out of them, which is the cynicism and the murder at the heart of their thinking. It's just, it's, it makes the Soviets, it makes Stalin look like a pussycat.
The context that is often lost when talking about the two atomic bombs.
Yes.
But Okinawa.
Okinawa. You all you need, Iwo Jima, Okinawa are telling the Americans what fighting on the mainland is going to be. They're being used as signals by the Japanese as much as anything else. Japanese government, they're saying, you're right, the closer you get, the worse it gets. And when the Potsdam Declaration is issued, the Japanese government says, and it says in it, we're going to bring war criminals to bear. We have no interest in destroying Japan itself. Japanese nation will remain intact. But the people responsible for this, we're going to do something about. We're going to deal with. And the Potsdam Declaration makes clear not to have any of the, because the Americans float this Morgenthau Plan idea before the end of the war in Germany, where the idea is that Germany will be reduced to sort of a peasant economy and not have any, not be allowed any weapons or any industry and all that. And Goebbels then uses that to say, they want us to have they want to reduce Germany completely. So in the Potsdam Declaration, they make it clear we're not interested in destroying Japanese industry and stopping Japanese progress, but we're coming for the people who did this. And the fact that the Japanese government goes, after an atomic bomb, goes, bah, nah, not interested. These are the concessions we demand. We can retain our army. We retain this, that, and the other. It's absolutely amazing. And I write in the book, it's the second atomic bomb that changes the world. And I think it really is. I think doing it once, kind of whatever, right? You've got this new weapon. You'll try it once. It's doing it again. It's showing the resolve to do it again that I think is the sort of thing that changes the world completely. For my money, it's the second bomb that brings in the atomic age. Because once is a demonstration of power, twice is a demonstration of intent or a direction of travel, I think. and that even then the Japanese can't quite bring themselves to.
Yeah,
There's
so
a
it makes
massive
you think.
argument, about
If
what to do next.
if we speculate, I mean, this is alternative history, but if there'd been
Yeah.
only Hiroshima,
Mm. Well, who
less.
knows? Who knows? Because after Hiroshima, yes, after Hiroshima, that is the period of prevarication, hair-splitting pedantry from the Japanese government, and real proper gridlock in the war cabinet between the army, who are denying it's an atomic bomb, because the state of science in Japan is they know the atomic bomb is possible. Of course they do, because everyone does. They know it's a theoretical possibility, and the Navy have been trying to build an atomic weapon, and the Army have been trying to build an atomic weapon. And interestingly, the Navy's committee is chaired by the bloke the Army has got in charge. But because he's so sworn to secrecy, he won't tell the Navy that the Army also trying to figure it out, which is quite interesting. He's siloed to the point where he's on one committee going, "Oh, you're not really making any progress," while at the same time running a lab himself. There's that going on, and they've done the thing where they go, "Well, we can't make one, so it's impossible." Which I think is a very interesting way of looking at group. A very interesting example of groupthink. That they've convinced themselves it's impossible, so it's impossible. Whereas if the Japanese know the first thing about America, they know it's much richer than they are. They know it's committed its vaster economy to the war effort, blah blah blah, and also, I mean, America has the space, the resources, the people, whatever. But the conclusion they draw is, well, it's just too difficult, can't be done. And there's the extraordinary scramble after the the Army then go back to their scientists to go, is there any chance you can make us one of these really quickly? Like after they've been they've been nuked themselves. I mean, that is the most extraordinary thing. So yes, there's this period where the Army are denying it's an atomic bomb. The Emperor is beginning to go, not so sure about this. And I think what's also really about his situation, I think what's really, really interesting is that they only find out it's an atomic bomb from Truman telling them. So you get this extraordinary moment in global history where the world's most secret scientific project is suddenly public because the Americans use it and then they say what it is. They leave no mystery. They leave nothing unclear to the Japanese. And even then the Japanese, after the first atomic bomb, are still going, well, they're lying. Can't be done. It's impossible. We fight on. Let's make the Americans pay for their victory. And I think it's the second one where where it's quite clear that it's real, game over, and the Emperor concedes. And that's the atomic age, the birth of it's the second one going off. Unfortunately, the horror of all of this.
Yeah.
The sheer horror of all of this, they drag their heels over a thing like that and they get, another 60,000 people killed.
And reading about, the manner of the deaths in the book, the burns. This is an attack.
But it's the logical conclusion of Allied war policy, though, the atomic bomb. More bang for your buck. You're trying to inflict as much damage on the enemy as possible without hurting yourselves. The fact it's one plane that could destroy a city rather than, in Tokyo, when they raid Tokyo, in February, it's hundreds of planes. This is one plane, and so the Allied, conception, which is the thing, for shorthand, steel not flesh. You use steel, you use technology, not people. That means our flesh. It means we don't expend our flesh. We do not care what we have to do to the other side to bring that about. And it's also the sort of conclusion of the idea that the bomber will always get through, which is the pre-war panic conception. There's an Italian aviation enthusiast called Duet, who proposes the idea that what you do is you bomb a population, the population says enough, and the government changes its course direction. And the atomic bomb, in a way, although the Japanese government are not listening to their population, they're not interested, in a way that the atomic bomb is the final arrival point of that idea that's posited by Duet after the First World War. It's the culmination of the Allied direction of travel, unfortunately, and shows that war involves escalation, involves this idea that at some point we will stun our opponent into defeat. And the fact it takes 2 atomic bombs to do that is incredibly depressing.
The use of those 2 bombs is often debated, has
So,
always been after the war.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
what you're saying. The lack of understanding of the mindset of the Japanese is very important to take into account if you're going to make a judgment whether it was a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, the Japanese really don't know what the Americans think. They've got people really, they know what they're saying on the airwaves, but the Americans know everything that the Japanese think because they've broken into their diplomatic cipher and they know exactly what's going on. They know everything the Japanese are saying to themselves internally, because they've got into their codes, and this means that the Americans do know what they're dealing with, in terms of the Japanese saying to one another, well, we're going to make, and because of Okinawa as well, because of the battles they're fighting, they know that the Japanese are going to go. The idea is they're going to go down swinging and exact as big a blood price as they possibly can. What that would be, we will never know, but I think so often, and this is a thing James and I talk about a lot. So often, you really got to try to park the historiography. You've really got to try to park our moral judgments and look what were people thinking at the time. Is there any way we can understand that? Is there any way we can get a glance into it? And I think what's very interesting about the Japanese government attitude is very much that they are genuinely caught between a faction that wants to fight forever and believes in extracting this bloody peace from the Americans to save their own skins, which is the other thing. Because after all, the Potsdam Declaration says we're coming for the war. People who started this, we want the war criminals. We want them. And if you're the head of the army, you're a war criminal. If you're the head of the Japanese army, And after all, Curtis LeMay says, had we lost the war, I'd be a war criminal for firebombing Japan, right? So the Americans know, everyone knows which way the table's tilting, right? So I think to try and obviously there are moral arguments about the atomic bombing, but I think you've really got to try and look at who are the people making decisions in Japan that stall the surrender and make the Americans for Christ's sake, I will do it again then. And I mean, it's such an awful story. I mean, you work your way through the end of Nazi Germany. It's disgusting, and they're press ganging 15-year-olds and 60-year-olds and all that, and there's death camps everywhere, and the Allied armies are discovering them, and the Germans are hanging on for military honor and all that. That's revolting. And then you get to the Japanese end of it. You're like, oh my God, it's even worse. I can't stand it. Because they've also been fighting longer in China and behaving absolutely disgustingly in China. Which again, I think we tend to forget this. The Americans come in at the end of the Second World War for the Japanese. They're the last 3 years of the Japanese war, really. From end of 41, so 42 to 45. The Japanese have been at it they're going to Manchukuo in the early 30s, and that's not strictly speaking the start of the Second World War, or is it?
Yeah. Is it 30? Is it 37? I've heard, or is it 30?
Well, no, they invade Manchuria in I think it's 31, 32. I ought to know this off the top of my head. By the way, one of the things I do is once I've written a book, I dump it all and I don't remember any of it. But just want to make that clear.
Of course.
I haven't read it. I haven't read it lately. I'm thinking about the next thing. But the point is if you're Chinese, when does the Second World War start? And of course, the Japanese fight the Soviets in 1939, and lose and come to a non-aggression pact agreement with them. They don't surrender though, because the other core difference is in Germany they have lost a world war and they have surrendered at the end of the First World War. They're very unhappy about how they did that. And they're very unhappy about the circumstances around it, which leads to the stab in the back myth and the fact that they don't want a repeat of 1918, and that's hard baked into all of their politics, not just Nazi politics. You can't have that happen again, where the government pulls the rug out from under the army. So when the army end up being the government, essentially in Germany in 1945, they really don't know how to approach the surrender, because they will now be the people pulling the rug, is what they're worried about appearing to be, which is why they keep talking about military honor, even though there's none. Monty knows.
Yeah, there's a quote in the book where, is it Wolf says, if we carry on fighting now, we'll be war criminals.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Exactly. And he is actually he's he's done crimes against humanity. Leave the war criminals out of it. You know, the war criminal aspect. He's done the crimes against humanity stuff. He's fully paid up to that aspect of things. But then I think, you know, that's interesting because the Nazis are able to make a distinction between the things they've had to do in their race war that they don't see as that. They see it as a sort of destiny's unfortunate task put upon them. If you're a Nazi, I think. Whereas the
Yes,
war's a
indeed.
war.
Lawrence Rees has talked about that in the Nazi Mind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
doing a favour for the world.
You know, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. That aspect to it. Um, Whereas actually, the other way of looking at it, it's just another front. You know, it's another front in their war on the world, the way the world exists as it is, and but they are able for themselves to make that distinction. You know, I think we don't have to. I think it's all part and parcel of the same thing. But I think you know, it is. The Japanese haven't had this experience. They don't have a stab in the back. They don't have a surrender example to look at. It's just plain up, straight up dishonourable. And the fact that politicians are using that, they know that their soldiers think that, and they know their people are bought in on that, sold on that idea. The fact that they're using that to then extract this bloody peace to the Americans, the cynicism at the heart of the Japanese government. And also, you know, which is reflected in the emperor then going, fine, great, I'll completely change the constitution so that I don't go to the gallows and you lot do, which is basically what he does. It's sort of like, you know, they're all as cynical, they're all as bad as each other. The fact that the emperor then, you know, emerges intact, I think is very, very interesting, and shows that, you know, he's as bad as they are, but he wins.
There's a really interesting photograph in the book where you have a meeting of British and Soviet troops.
Yeah.
And the Brits, this is around the Baltic area, actually.
Yes. It'll be Bismarck. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so the Brits are enthusiastically shaking the hand, they're putting their arms and shoulders on of these Soviet counterparts. Have you got it there? And the Soviets, though, it's so interesting because they are standing there looking a little bit nonplussed.
Well, or cagey. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just ain't sure, are they? And they're quite clearly there's been. I mean, because after all, in you know, in Britain, Joseph Stalin is a hero. Has been elevated to the sort of heroic level after the, you know, after Barbarossa begins. And the trade union movement were totally into him, and, you know, the mobilised left-wing aspects of British society are delighted to be aligned with the Soviets in destroying fascism or Nazism, you know, however they're framing it. You know what I mean? So there will be, there's no doubt that some of those Tommies, they've just heard positive stuff about the Soviets this entire time and all that. Whereas the Soviet soldiers from this, you know, this paranoid culture that doesn't really care about life and all that, and probably thinks that maybe we're going to end up fighting these guys soon. I mean, it's very interesting. There are lots of stories about, you know, fraternization and people going discovering how drunk the Russians all are and all the Soviets all are and all this sort of thing. But also around then there is a standoff at Wismar to stop the Soviets getting into Denmark. You know, there's a genuine moment where, you know, Erich Bols, who's the Major General commanding 6th Airborne, says to the Soviets, "I've got artillery, and you've reached the stop line, and you're not going over it. Thanks very much. Afraid not. And I'm not prepared to enforce the stop line. I'm not afraid to enforce the stop line if I have to." And the Soviets going, "Yeah, no problem." But there is, it's fraught with those meetings. There's lots of things going on all at once, you know. And I think what you've got is, as you say, you see it in the picture. The Soviets look standoffish. They look cagey. The British are like, "Oh, pleased to meet you, chum. You know, Joe Stalin, here is Stalingrad," and all that. And I think, you know, there's just so many things cascading out of the moment before the Cold War. The potential and the potentialities, and then the unfortunately, again, this is one of the things where we know how it ends.
Well, exactly. I was thinking, because the desire to get to Berlin and the fact that we didn't. Eastern Europe effectively becomes part of the Soviet Empire. And so was there ever a temptation by people like Montgomery to Proceed.
He was spitting feathers, but he'd reached the point where he'd sort of conceded that he had to do as he was told. I think, had he lunged for Berlin, I think Eisenhower would have just shut him down logistically. So he wouldn't have been able to do it. I mean, funny enough, James and I have this exact conversation this morning about the last phase of the war, where because one of the things, that characterizes the last 2 months is that German soldiers, German armies are entirely comfortable with surrendering to the Western Allies, and in fact, pretty much determined to do so. And you've got millions of people streaming west to surrender to the Western Allies. And operationally, the American, the British, French armies, they have this, and Canadian armies, they have this sort of, they're trying to fight whoever still wants to fight, but they're also dealing with lots and lots and lots of prisoners and all this sort of stuff, and displaced persons. It's the biggest refugee crisis in all human. Millions of people going in all different directions. From the very peculiar business of the Third Reich being the most multicultural place on the planet, despite being a race empire, because they've enslaved people from all over Europe to work there. So there's all these contradictions, and I mean, we talked about this today. Before the Germans start their offensive before the Soviets start their offensive on Berlin, they're roughly equidistant from Berlin as the Americans who've come up to the Elbe. And we were saying, and Eisenhower's resolved not to go for Berlin, and he's told Stalin he's not going to Berlin, and he's made that decision himself. He's not consulted with anyone. Montgomery's very unhappy about it. But I think had the Western Allies moved on Berlin, I think they'd have met the same sort of surrendering that they're dealing with in the rest of Germany. When they encircle Model's army in the Ruhr pocket, they all give up. 350,000 men go, yeah, fine, game's up, game over. But the Germans have to fight the Soviets to the last man, and will do everything they possibly can because they know what they've done in the East. And we were talking today, and it's pure conjecture. Had the Americans made their move on Berlin, we think the Germans would have gone, yeah, all right, no problem, we give up, and Berlin would have fallen to the Western Allies for far less blood. But Eisenhower is very, very worried about troop numbers because he's thinking about Japan. He's thinking, as soon as we're done here, we pack up and we go east, and there ain't nothing we could do about that. And I've got to be careful. And his casualty predictions are enormous. Bradley comes to him with a casualty prediction of 100,000 people. He's not prepared to do it because we come all the way back around to the thing we were talking right at the start, is that what Allied generals are trying to do is save their men's lives, not expend them. And the American military tradition from the Civil War is that you destroy the enemy's army where you find it, not that you need to take a city or you need to, how you create the political outcome you want is by destroying the other side's military capacity.
Well, we've come back to the beginning, and that was entirely by design. So
it's beautifully done.
Yeah, but this has been fantastic. The book, it's when this comes out, it will already be out.
Yes,
within days. So best of luck with it. But it's fantastic. It's written with great urgency. It really really makes you want to turn the page.
Oh, brilliant! That's lovely. That's lovely to hear. And it was
you just feel the sort of the pace of it. It's it's
this is one of the things I think is really interesting. Hopefully, when I was reading about the decision to use the atomic bomb, and there was disagreement at the top in America. Admiral Lay thought it would be crossing the line. He said, "Why don't we just gas their cities? If we're going to do this, it's the same. It would be the same as gassing them all, right? It's on a par with that, and that's unacceptable. We don't do that, right?" And one of the guys talking about this, he says academics sit and think about this for months on end or years on end. They toss and turn whether to deploy the atom bomb. We didn't have the kind of time people have to think about this stuff now. This was happening to us right then and there. The decisions were upon us. The Trinity test successful. Potsdam conference is happening. What are we going to do now? We've got to launch an invasion in October. How are we going to line that up? No, it's coming at you like that. And so I'm much more interested in history that reflects that rather than, if you stop and think about it, because they didn't have time to stop and think about it. It was coming out, if history is just one thing after another, as whoever said that, which I think is a thing I really love. If it really is one thing after another, it's experienced the way we experience it. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They haven't worked out all the consequences, the ramifications of everything they're doing. Because you can't. And that's actually how people make decisions. That's the world people live, rather than a sort of historiographical, perfect, platonic ideal of how we make decisions. Anyway, there we are. That's what we've tried to write, a book that feels like that.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I won't ask who wrote what section, but this has been great. Al, thank you.
My pleasure. A total pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Plenty more great histories on the way, so please do follow or subscribe. And if you can share with friends and family, I'd be most grateful. But until then, thank you and good night.